The world of the ancient past is often imagined as a collection of isolated civilizations, each growing within its own boundaries. But what if the greatest empires of the ancient world, Rome in the west and China in the east, were not strangers to each other? What if their stories crossed oceans, deserts, and borders long before the world was fully mapped? What if these two titans, separated by nearly 10,000 kilometers, engaged in a silent rivalry that shaped the destiny of continents? Our journey begins with a vision, the Roman Empire at its height, stretching from the cold forests of Britain to the golden sands of Egypt, and the Han Dynasty in China, a powerhouse of technology, philosophy, and military might. These two civilizations never collided in open war, but their influence, ambitions, and whispers of power traveled through merchants, explorers, and spies. This is the hidden history of when Rome met China, not in battlefields, but in ideas, trade, diplomacy, and silent competition. Centurias Ago, the Silk Road, was more than a trade route. It was an artery through which cultures flowed. Silk, spices, glass, gold, and secrets traveled from one corner of the world to another. At one end stood Rome, obsessed with luxury, hungry for the wonders of the East. At the other end stood China, cautious yet curious, eager to expand its influence across Central Asia. The Silk Road became the middle ground where their ambitions quietly brushed against each other. Roman writers like Pliny the Elder complained about the empire's addiction to silk. They wondered why Roman women were draping themselves in translucent fabrics that came from mysterious lands beyond India. That land, unknown to Romans by name, but admired from afar, was China. To Rome, China was a fabled paradise Syrica, the land of silk. They believed its people were tall, noble, and lived near the edge of the world. Rome spent a fortune on silk, draining its treasury and enriching distant markets so far east that even Roman coins found their way into Chinese tombs. But the Chinese knew of Rome as well. They called it Da Qin, the Great Qin, a name that implied admiration. The Han Dynasty saw Rome as a distant, powerful mirror of themselves, equal in strength and wealth. Chinese historical texts describe Roman cities as magnificent, filled with tall buildings, orderly laws, and advanced craftsmanship. They believed Rome was ruled by wise kings chosen for their virtue, which of course was not entirely true. But the idea fascinated them. To China, Daqin was not an enemy, it was a rival, a distant reflection, a mystery worth understanding. One of the greatest stories of Neokanta comes from the time of Emperor Wu of Han. In his quest for alliances against the nomadic Xiongnu, he sent his diplomat Zhongqian westward. Zhongqian never reached Rome, but he opened China's eyes to the vast world that lay beyond its borders. His journey revealed the existence of great kingdoms, advanced cultures, and people who had never heard of the Han Empire. These discoveries inspired China to push its frontiers west, securing Central Asia and influencing trade all the way to the Mediterranean. Though Zhongqian never met a Roman, his mission set the stage for centuries of indirect rivalry. But what about direct contact? Surprisingly, there were attempts. In the year 166 AD, Roman envoys claiming to represent Emperor Antoninus Pius, possibly Marcus Aurelius, arrived in China. They brought gifts of ivory, rhinoceros, horn, and turtle shells. But Chinese historians noted something strange. These envoys didn't speak Latin, and they arrived through Southeast Asian traders. Were they real Roman diplomats, or were they merchants pretending to be official envoys to gain better trade privileges? The truth remains a mystery, but the encounter is recorded as the first official Roman mission to China. On the other side of the world, a Roman historian named Florus wrote an astonishing account. He claimed that ambassadors from the seers, the Chinese once, arrived in Rome during the reign of Augustus, seeking friendship. Whether the story is true or exaggerated is debated, but it shows just how fascinated the Romans were by the idea of China. The two empires kept their distance, yet their rivalry played out not through armies, but through economics. Rome desperately wanted silk. China desperately wanted Roman glassware, metalwork, and luxury goods. Each empire became financially dependent on the other without even meeting. Imagine a rivalry so quiet that neither side openly acknowledged it, yet both secretly competed for influence over the same trade routes. In Central Asia, their worlds came closest to colliding. China controlled the Eastern Silk Road through military garrisons known as the Western Region's Protectorate. Rome, meanwhile, influenced the Western End through its client states in Syria and the Middle East. Between them stood the Parthian Empire, a powerful barrier. Parthia knew that if Rome and China ever made direct contact, their own trade monopoly would collapse. So Parthia manipulated, restricted, and blocked envoys, ensuring that neither superpower reached the other. Their strategy worked. For centuries, Parthia became the silent gatekeeper, controlling the flow of goods and preventing open relations between the West and East. Yet stories still slipped across borders. Chinese soldiers heard tales of Roman legions, disciplined, armored, marching like machines. Romans heard rumors of Chinese crossbows that could pierce armor and armies that fought in perfect formations. Each side imagined the other with a mixture of awe and fear. Then came one of the strangest legends of ancient history: the mystery of the Lost Legion. Some historians believe that after the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BC, captured Roman soldiers were moved eastward by the Parthians. Decades later, a Chinese report from the Han Dynasty described a group of foreign soldiers fighting in a fish-scale formation, unlike anything Chinese troops had seen before. These soldiers were captured, settled in China, and possibly integrated into local communities. Were they Romans? The evidence is debated, but the theory remains one of history's most intriguing possibilities: that Rome and China may have faced each other not as empires, but as soldiers on a distant battlefield in Central Asia. As centuries passed, both empires reached their golden age's end, then began their decline. Rome struggled with civil wars, invasions, and economic collapse. China faced rebellions, corruption, and the weakening of imperial authority. Yet even in decline, the echoes of their rivalry persisted. Their technologies, philosophies, and trade shaped societies across Eurasia. But the story doesn't end with the fall of the Han Dynasty or the collapse of Rome. The legacy of their rivalry continued through successor states, traders, and explorers. Medieval travelers like Marco Polo carried tales of China back to Europe, while Chinese sailors during the Ming Dynasty reached as far as Africa, demonstrating ambitions that echoed their ancient past. And even today, the idea of East and West, two worlds with immense power and influence, continues to shape global politics, culture, and identity. When we look back at history, we often focus on wars, battles, and direct confrontations. But sometimes, the most powerful rivalries are the silent ones. Rome and China never officially faced each other on a battlefield, yet their influence crossed deserts, mountains, and centuries. Their rivalry was fought through trade, knowledge, curiosity, and imagination. This is the forgotten story of how two civilizations, separated by distance, united by ambition, not through war, but through the silent currents of history. This is the untold tale of when Rome met China, and how their distant rivalry helped shape the world we live in today.